here we go.
Welcome to the 9 Route Fantasy Football Podcast.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back into the 9 Route Fantasy Football Podcast. Pat and Scott here with you in the twilight of Week 5 of the NFL and your fantasy football season. A lot of news, definitely. We're going to touch base on injuries and some occupational issues as well. It looks like it was a crazy week in the NFL, but as far as that goes, we'll dive right in just a few minutes. Pat, how's everything going? You survived this week, fantasy and otherwise?
A much better week this week for me, fantasy wise. I think in the 8 leagues that I actually play head to head, I think I'm going to go 6-2. So it's a little bit better, a lot better than last week. Nice. How'd you fare this week? Matchups?
Not so well. I did have my tight end start of the week. I actually took my own advice. I was 0 for 2 in my Tay starts when it came to Taysom Hill. Unfortunately, they couldn't pull those games out. But looks like I swept Donnie as far as the 2 games that I had against him. So, but that's not hard. We know how that works. But other than that, not too good. I think I'm like 3-5. And again, that best ball, I don't know if you count them as losses or wins, but I see you're doing rather well in that one. I am meh, to say the least.
Yeah, I don't count that one in the wins and losses because it's just a running score. But yeah, I think I'm after this week should stay in second place in that league. But I kind of got a reprieve in that one, as you know, with the new owners entering, jumped into that supplemental draft that we had and grabbed a couple of good players in there and was able to kind of boost my team up almost immediately. So, it is what it is. It's, not to pat myself on the back, but I could tell that my team was probably, even though I finished second last year, I could tell my team was aging and starting to fall apart. So I decided to jump in that supplemental draft and basically retool my entire team and did it fairly well. I can't complain, like I said. So, but I don't really count that league. I'll see how that works out by the end, because I've been in those total points leagues before where, you're cruising along doing well, and then all of a sudden a couple injuries happen or guys on other teams just take off, and all of a sudden you're kind of left, holding the bag and your team sucks. So it does just kind of depend on, you just ride those total point leagues, you ride them out as long as you can until the wheels fall off. And hopefully they fall off for, some of the other owners and not for your squad necessarily, but that's kind of how those ones work out.
Yep. And then sometimes those wheels don't fall off. You just need some fix a flat and get yourself where you need to be. But the dynasty side, it's not a sprint, it's a marathon. Obviously, you want to try to take it every year, but we'll see. We shall see. As far as getting started, I want to say a couple things as far as Mickey's Protocol in Tuckerton. Again, friend of the show. We love everybody over there. They have some excellent food and drink specials. This place is special. Again, you can bring the guys, you can bring the girls, you can bring the family, and sometimes that is all the above, depending on how things go. But definitely one of the places you definitely want to stop, throughout the week. Again, Monday night, kids eat free. So swing by 327 East Main Street in Tuckerton for Mickey's Protocol Pub.
Yeah, if you want to follow us on social media, please be sure to check us out on Twitter. We are at the 9Route1 and at Scott from Delco. We also have a website that you can check out, www.the9routeffb.com. And if you'd like to email the show, ask a question to any of us that we can answer on the show, please do. Our email address is the9routeffb@gmail.com, and that is the number 9, not spelled out in letters. So the number 9 routeffb@gmail.com. And I think we should jump into the news here. It seems like we have quite a bit of injury news yet again to get into this week. It seems like every week it's a lot of guys get hurt, obviously, week by week, but doesn't seem like there's always a lot of fantasy relevant players, but the last couple of weeks definitely have produced quite a few fantasy relevant players, either leaving games or missing games completely. So let's jump into our news and injuries. Time for the news.
Bit of news that actually broke just before we got going here, and again, Pat and I were talking about it, and the aftermath that is already starting to happen. Carolina Panthers have fired head coach Matt Rule. A lot of people saw this coming, Pat. I know you joked about prognosticating it just as far as this weekend, to be honest. And again, I know with just watching that team over the last couple of years, obviously, it's a young coach. Some of these guys come out of college and they're expected to just, set the world on fire, and owners want to have the next big thing and all that. But it doesn't always work out. It just doesn't seem like he was maybe cut out at this stage of his career to be an NFL coach. Some of those that listen that even coach maybe like a kids team, high school, anything like that. There's a lot of stuff to do, and those guys just own that job. But it seems like the best ones tend to be the lifers. There's a lot of guys out there that are deserving of the job. Steve Wilkes, former Arizona Cardinal coach back in 2018. He only coached 1 year before they brought in the Cliff Kingsbury and Kyler Murrays of the world. He'll be the interim coach for the time being right now. And it looks like, there's already whispers of Christian McCaffrey getting traded to Buffalo. Phil Snow, the defensive coordinator we saw, was also let go. So definitely a house cleaning, to say the least, down there. Fantasy-wise, that could shake out. Some of those guys, DJ Moore and like, that were maybe faded, might step up a little bit. And again, there's some injury news tied into that as well. We will get to in just a little bit. But Matt Rule out as head coach of the Carolina Panthers.
Yeah, it's funny. I was watching. I do tweet some things here and there as the games are going on, just to kind of stay in the loop with everything that's going on. And I actually sent a tweet out after the pick six that Baker Mayfield threw, which I think is the same play that he injured that he sprained his ankle on, trying to make a tackle. But after he threw that pick six, and that on TV they showed DAmico Ryans, the San Francisco 49ers defensive coordinator, really just losing his mind after that pick six. So I actually tweeted out, wouldn't it be funny if that pick six was the straw that broke the camel's back for the Matt Rule error, and he ends up getting fired, and DAmico Ryans ends up becoming the next head coach of the Carolina Panthers, which, obviously not this year because he's under contract with the 49ers, but I think Ryans will definitely be a head coach in this league. Probably as soon as next year, and with the Panthers job basically, already being one that's going to be open with an interim head coach, I could easily see, him sliding in there and being an excellent head coach. But I think it's funny that, these things kind of coincided on the same day. And then after I sent the tweet out, like I said, I sent it out yesterday during the game, and somebody actually replied to me today and was like, "Man, you were on that one. They literally fired the guy the next day." So it was definitely something I think we all saw coming with Matt Rule. Unfortunate for him, but like you said, maybe fortunate for some of the fantasy options on that team. A little injury news that we're going to get into for the Carolina Panthers as well. Baker Mayfield left the game with a high ankle sprain at the end of that game. Looks like he's probably going to miss at least a week, maybe a little bit more. These high ankle sprains are a little bit different with quarterbacks because they don't necessarily need as much mobility. And Mayfield isn't one of those guys, like a Justin Fields or even a mobile type quarterback who's going to be running around a lot. But you do obviously have to have some mobility in the pocket and be able to be comfortable and be able to put some weight on that foot when you throw. So he's likely going to miss at least a week, maybe more. The Carolina offense did not look great so far in the first 5 games of the season. I'm not saying that PJ Walker is a better quarterback than Baker Mayfield, but sometimes you just need a change. You know what I mean? Sometimes it's not about, having the best player in there or whatever. Sometimes you just need something different. You just need to change it up a little bit. And maybe all of this, the Matt Rule firing, the Baker Mayfield injury, maybe all of this is what Carolina needs to sort of reset a little bit and maybe focus a little bit more on, it seems like they just kind of were doing the same things every week. Like it wasn't working, and yet they just kept doing it. So maybe this change will be good for the franchise altogether, but we'll see how that goes moving forward. I would not suggest rostering PJ Walker in any leagues. Maybe if you're in a super flex or 2 QB league or something like that. Again, he's going to get a couple starts, so he's probably worth throwing on the end of your bench, but not somebody that I'm suggesting to pick up and play in a standard 1 QB league or anything like that.
True. Another quarterback. This time it might be in the water there in Miami. We talked about obviously Tua being banged up with some serious concussion issues last week, and may not be available just yet. They're definitely going to have to take it easy with him. Teddy Bridgewater did not last long against the New York Jets yesterday. Suffered a elbow, shoulder, and possible concussion. Did not return in the game. Enters Skylar Thompson of Kansas State, rookie quarterback, came in and did what he could. It's definitely a tough start. 19 of 33, a $166 and a pick. That team as a whole got just smoked by the Jets, and again, that's not easy for anybody to deal with. But again, that defense had their struggles there as well. So Teddy Bridgewater went out. Skylar Thompson came in. Right now, we'll see what happens with Bridgewater. Tua, again, slated for week 6. We will see if that will happen, but we don't know just yet if and or when. And again, I know they're going to have to take it a little bit easy with him when it comes to getting him back. So we'll monitor that situation. And again, right now, wouldn't say picking up Skylar Thompson either, but I would say maybe look to see Tua getting back, hopefully sooner than later. Hopefully he comes back and he's okay.
The NFL Players Association, basically after what happened with Tua, they kind of rushed into sort of forcing the commissioner's hand on basically getting these concussion situations to be almost like an immediate ruled out situation. So what they started focusing on was something called ataxia, which is, basically any like we saw Tua do in, I believe it was week 3 when he first got injured, where he kind of got up and like stumbled. So anytime that players become, have some sort of hard head hit or whatever, which the league has already been looking at, and they seem to be a little weary or they stumble or they don't have good motor function right away. Basically what the Players Association is calling for is for those players to be ruled out immediately and not put them back in harm's way, which, as on a personal level, I agree with. I think that player safety is of utmost importance. I mean, these guys, they go out there and put their health on the line every week, honestly. So I do think it's a good thing. I think for fantasy football, however, it's going to be something that's going to have a ripple effect throughout fantasy football. And basically what's going to happen is now anybody who you think may possibly have a concussion or have gotten a concussion, a lot of times these guys are not going to be able to come back in games. So you're going to see a lot of guys who you may have in your starting lineup who take a hard hit, take a shot to the head, get tackled like Chris Olave did in the end zone this past week, and kind of thrown down and slammed the side of his head into the turf. Stuff like that is basically going to be an immediate will not return in those games, and that's going to like I said, that's going to have an effect on fantasy football moving forward. So it's going to be a lot of frustrated fantasy football owners, but it is for the health of the players. So it's definitely important that we think about that first. But I just wanted to throw that in there because we are a fantasy football podcast. This is something moving forward that we are going to have to sort of deal with in the fantasy football landscape from here on out. Is players coming out of games and then not going back into games. So I don't know if there's any way that we can remedy that as far as fantasy goes, but that's just going to be an unfortunate part of the way things move forward from here. But moving on to the running back injuries, unfortunately, Rashad Penny he cannot stay healthy for an entire year. I mean, this guy, every time he gets an opportunity, he shows how talented he is and how explosive he is, and then it seems like every year, he gets some freak injury, and this week it was a broken fibula, and he's going to need surgery and be out for the year. It's really unfortunate for him. Like I said, really, really good player, just really injury prone, unfortunately. Moving forward, though, I mean, this opens the door for Ken Walker, the third standout running back out of Michigan State. I think everybody was kind of, especially people who are in dynasty leagues, that Ken Walker was generally a top 5 pick in dynasty this year, rookie drafts. And I think everybody was sort of, waiting for the Ken Walker era to begin in Seattle. And Rashad Penny did a really good job sort of keeping that time at bay. But the Ken Walker era is beginning right now. And I think if he is available in your league, he is absolutely the number one waiver wire pickup this week. Seattle's offense has looked much better than I think any of us thought coming into the season. And Rashad Penny is part of the reason why. And I think Ken Walker is just as, if not more talented than Penny. And I think he's going to continue to take over. I mean, you saw in this game, he only had 8 carries, but he took one of those carries to the house for a 69-yard touchdown. The other 7 resulted in 19 yards, but finished the day 8 for 88 and a touchdown. And if Geno Smith keeps playing well, if the Seattle defense keeps giving up a ton of points, there's going to be a lot of shootouts involving the Seattle Seahawks. And I think having Ken Walker in your lineup is going to give you exposure to a lot of those points. And like I said, he's definitely, for me, my number one waiver wire pickup this week if he's available in your league.
Another running back to speak of, actually 2. We're going to touch base on same team, same game. Both James Conner and Daryl Williams both suffered injuries. James Conner first, just to touch base on him, was a rib injury. Again, we know a lot of these players have to deal with those injuries from time to time, whether or not it was just some ligament damage or anything like that, or cartilage, or if it was a flat out broken rib concept. Definitely would have to find out once they get the injury reports out there on that level. Another, again, same game, same position, unfortunately for them, was Daryl Williams, who went out with a knee injury. So that had Benjamin finally getting a lot of chance to show off, and he's definitely worth waiver wire concepts, let alone some of you might have already had him stashed based on some preseason hype before Daryl Williams was signed. Did have a decent game, I would say, yesterday, in some spot stuff, so to speak. 8 carries for 25 yards and a touchdown. He also added 3 receptions for 28 yards, which is always the bread and butter of fantasy football PPR running back concepts. So Connor, I think, would probably be a little bit more likely, depending on how bad his injury is, would be more than likely a guy to probably still hang on or share a little bit of that backfield. Now, when it came to Williams, again, he was evaluated on the sideline before walking to the locker room. So again, some of these guys, they pick something up, they don't feel right, they just kind of get sidelined for parts of games. So we'll see what happens. But James Conner, Daryl Williams, that Arizona backfield could be interesting. Benjamin, if he's on the waiver wire, probably worth a stash on your bench. Again, somebody's injuries linger, and next thing you know, Eno could be the next man up.
Damian Harris also left the game against the Lions in week 5 with a hamstring injury. Left after only 4 carries and 1 reception for 1 yard. So Ramondre Stevenson sort of carried the bulk of the load from there on out, ended up with 25 carries, 161 yards, couple catches. Damian Harris has not been ruled out for week 6, so he still may be there, but he did miss a game last year with the same hamstring injury, same side and everything. So this is something that has popped up for him before, has kept him out of a game before. So if Ramondre Stevenson is available, which he probably isn't, but some leagues he's still out there. If he can get the full workload next week, I think that there's a chance that he could absolutely explode. He did this week for, like I said, 25 carries for 161 yards. So definitely doable again next week. Follow that one closely if you're a Ramondre Stevenson owner, or if he's available, go out and grab him. And I think, again, if Harris misses and Ramondre is basically the lone back there, I mean, they have some other guys that, they'll probably mix in here and there, just a few carries. But if Ramondre is the lead back in that situation, I think he's 100% start for next week, and could potentially be one of those waiver wire guys that wins you a week.
Something of note, just, we're putting it out there because, again, this is talking about some injury and waiver wire concepts. Saquon Barkley did get a little banged up in the third quarter yesterday against the Green Bay Packers. That was the early game. Some people weren't even awake yet. Obviously we hear Saquon and we hear injury, and I think everybody gets, a little hyped. I, for one, wasn't super high on him coming into the season until he could prove that he was back to his old ways of, just being one of the most dominant people at his position in the National Football League. And so far, he really has been. As far as our league of record, again, where Pat and I are our home league, he is RB3, not far off, only about 10 points behind Nick Chubb. Austin Eckler had a monster game yesterday to catapult him into second place. So again, he's right up there with all the big dogs where I think a lot of people thought he was going to be. That being said, keep an eye on it. They could, maybe try to dial things back. Obviously, that offense funneling through him has helped the Giants to become a solid team. They're not leaning on Daniel Jones in the passing game, to say the least. That's definitely more of an afterthought. Not anything crazy on the waiver wire that you'd say, you'd probably look for just a best running back overall. But for Saquon owners, if you just want to play it safe, you do have Matt Breida, and then Gary Brightwell is third on the list as far as the depth chart goes. So, maybe just something to keep an eye on, obviously, through the week. But it didn't sound like it was something that held him out for too long. And again, he's gotten through some worse injuries. We've seen that. So it's good to see him get back out there and back on the field.
Last night's game, T. Higgins was dressed, ready to go, and, ran a couple of routes, played a couple of snaps, and then, couldn't continue to go on that ankle. So he left the game, did not return, ended up without a target in that game, which was disappointing if you had him, in your fantasy lineup, because it's a Sunday night game. So those games are, you have a lot less players to choose through to, make a substitution. And the fact that he was listed as in for that game, you probably didn't really want. I mean, it was a good matchup. You probably didn't want to sit T. Higgins against the Ravens in that game. And unfortunately, he burnt you and got you a goose. But, that's part of fantasy football. You go into a game questionable and you try to go, and he tried as best he could to get out there. It just wasn't his night. But as far as a waiver wire pickup, I don't see this lingering. Like I said, the fact that he was able to go means that he was really close. He probably just tweaked the ankle a little bit and wasn't 100%. And, you really need to be pretty darn close to 100% to beat defensive backs in the NFL as a wide receiver. So probably best for the team that he just, sat the rest of the game out. If this continues to linger, Tyler Boyd may be a guy that you can pick up. He played fairly well last night, 4 targets, 3 catches for 32 yards. Not a world beater by any means, but I think if for whatever reason T. Higgins is out next week and they know going into the game that he's out, I think Tyler Boyd will be a much bigger part of the offense and could be somebody that might be worth picking up and possibly playing in your flex position.
Moving on, again, another wide receiver, one of the young ones, rookie wide receiver Christian Watson of Green Bay, left yesterday's game, again, that early game in London, with a hamstring injury. He really has had trouble throughout training camp and just trying to stay healthy when it comes to that. It's going to be kind of tough. I mean, it's one of those things that could linger. He hasn't really had epic production, and that whole offense as a whole we've seen is definitely not Green Bay of last year or the year before that. Obviously having Aaron Rodgers struggle to connect to wide receivers and things like that, there's been a couple bright spots, but Watson himself, he's one of those guys, if you don't have to, you probably shouldn't be rostering him almost at this point. It's been a shame he hasn't really been producing. He's really gifted athletically. So if he's hampered by hamstring and injuries to that nature, being able to play through and make tough catches, we've seen him have a little bit of trouble with that too. Right now, it's just not looking too hot for him. It's his rookie season. So, hey, Dynasty, obviously you're going to hang on to him. You want to keep him on your bench. Maybe he does turn things around and start to pick it up a little bit. But missing a lot of time and not being, healthy enough to be consistently on the field isn't going to be too good. So he did not return to that game. It's something you want to monitor. And again, if signs point down, you might want to look to maybe drop him. Or he could end up on IR. You never know. But we'll see what happens this week when the injury reports come out.
Yeah, it seems like Dobbs is the rookie wide receiver to own in Green Bay for sure.
Yes.
Tyrique Hill also left the game against the Jets this week. Still ended up finishing as the leading receiver for the Dolphins. That was like after Teddy Bridgewater went out, which was after the first play. And like you said, Skylar Thompson came in. It was a pretty rough sledding for the Dolphins offensively. I think their lone bright spot was Raheem Mostert running the ball, but he'll finish this game 7 for 47, no touchdowns. Was seen in a walking boot after the game. So again, I mentioned last week, walking boots don't always mean serious injury. Sometimes it's just a stabilization thing. But again, walking boots are never great. I mean, you don't see completely healthy guys leaving the locker room in a walking boot. So this is something we're going to have to monitor as far as, what the injury is for T. Higgins and how severe it is and if he's going to miss any time. If he does and Tua comes back, they're not leaning on Skylar Thompson again next week. You could end up picking up Cedric Wilson as a waiver wire option. Again, not somebody that I'm going to, suggest you run out and grab immediately. But, Wilson was a big signing there from the Cowboys in the offseason and really hasn't done a whole lot as far as, getting targets and snaps in that offense. It's been pretty much the Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle show. But, with Hill potentially missing a game, maybe more depending on how severe the foot injury is, Cedric Wilson could be a guy who could step up in his absence.
Another injury, another wide receiver, and another young one who's pound for pound has really looked like maybe the best of the bunch so far, at least one of the most productive. Chris Olave. It was a scary injury. Made a great touchdown catch for 16 yards from Andy Dalton, and appeared to hit his head pretty hard while making the catch. It wasn't so much the physical tackling concepts on that, but hit his head pretty hard. Looks like some reports say that he was unconscious on the field and did not return. So obviously, with anybody, again, we talk about the head injuries and nobody's messing around, let alone you just get your bell rung. But if he were out cold, that's something totally different. So after being evaluated, they didn't even hesitate. He was done for the day. And we will wait to see what kind of shakes out report-wise. Obviously, Wednesday usually is the big day. Right now on that roster, again, they've had some injuries. We saw Taysom Hill step up big time and things of that nature. They do have some depth at the wide receiver position. Now it's being tested a little bit. Jarvis Landry's been banged up. Michael Thomas has been banged up. Again, you have a few options there. Marquez Callaway is always, as of last year, always been a guy on the radar for eventually maybe breaking out. He did only have 2 catches yesterday for 5 yards. But again, that offense was in a little bit of flux. Alvin Kamara seems to be back to his old ways. Obviously, that's good for the offense. Tre'Quan Smith is also a possibility if they are losing all that depth at wide receiver. So if you turn around next week and Olave's out, Landry's out, Michael Thomas is out, and again, that offense has still been pretty functional. I think the next step is going to be that, yes, Marcus Callaway, a Deontay Hardy, or a Tre'Quan Smith. Probably Callaway maybe has the most promise out of the bunch, but sometimes Hardy's been consistent. We just have to see. But hopefully Olave gets back on the field soon. Hopefully that head injury did not cause anything that maybe will cause him to miss too much time.
The tight end that missed most of the game this week, Dalton Schultz for the Dallas Cowboys, played 10 snaps, got 1 target, didn't catch it, and then that PCL injury that we had mentioned a few weeks ago that he sustained must have crept up on him and kept him out of the rest of the game. Schultz is a guy who, and I think I did mention this before, I was high on coming into the season. I thought with the Michael Gallup injury, with Amari Cooper gone, I thought Dalton Schultz was going to be a necessary part of this Dallas offense, and he was for the first few weeks. But since that PCL injury has sort of disappeared, he played 55 snaps last week, which is good. Didn't have a great game receiving, but at least he was able to stay in the whole game. Again, must have aggravated that injury this week. He's a guy who, if you roster Dalton Schultz, you better have another decent tight end option. Again, he's a guy who I'm probably not going to play until he comes back from that injury, puts up a decent game, shows that he can, finish the game and be an integral part of that offense that I kind of thought he was going to be coming into the season. As far as waiver wire goes, I wouldn't suggest picking up any Cowboys tight ends. I don't think that there's enough of an uptick in targets for either Jake Ferguson or Peyton Hendershot, who are basically the second and third on the depth chart there. But I do suggest, if he is still available in your league, picking up Michael Gallup now that he is healthy. He is going to be the Robin to CeeDee Lamb's Batman in that offense. And I think, once Dak comes back, which could be as early as this week, I think Gallup instantly becomes a guy who is going to command, somewhere in the neighborhood of 7 to 10 targets a week in that offense. And I think if he's still available, like I said, you need to go grab him immediately, because this Dalton Schultz injury definitely affects Michael Gallup and makes him more of a must start each week.
Another tight end, and this will be the last, thank goodness, injury to speak of so far. Pat Freiermuth of the Pittsburgh Steelers, again, left yesterday with a concussion, did not return. That game was, got out of hand quick, and again, there was nothing that he could have, done. I don't think even if he had stayed in the game and been healthy the whole time, so to speak. So again, the concussions, we just talked about it. We had in the last few weeks, it's becoming more of a thing where the league is really finally turning it into what it should be, making sure that these guys aren't going out there and causing some irreparable damage for down the road. That being said, obviously, when it comes to the waiver wire concepts, if you're interested, I know tight ends can be a little murky. You might want to play matchups. Zach Gentry is the next man up and did get a little bit involved in that game after the fact. Just to take a look, 5 catches for 43 yards, no touchdowns to speak of. So obviously, it looks like so far if Kenny Pickett's going to be throwing the ball a lot, and Lord knows he did. He's already got 65 attempts through a game and a half. And of those, basically so far, the tight end position has received 11 receptions for 93 yards. So he is targeting that, obviously, with checkdowns, a young quarterback. That's something where, in a PPR sense, and sometimes those are the guys, are either your Dawson Knox, Robert Tonyan, touchdown dependent to get double-digit points, or, again, a Zach Gentry who, is going to get you maybe 9, 10, 11 points based on something like that with a PPR concept, maybe a mix of a touchdown in there. So it's somebody maybe to just stash on the bench for a week, or again, maybe look for a matchup to see how serious this is for Freiermuth. But chances are, knock on wood, he should be okay and able to get back out there. And again, sometimes too, there's just a better tight end option based on that week to week. And again, those bye weeks are here. So we are, we'll be talking about that in a little bit.
Yes. Thank God that was all of the injury news. I really, that's the worst part of this, is we have to go through it because it makes a difference in fantasy football, but it does suck having to go through and talk about all these injuries all the time. So we're going to hit a couple of other waiver wire pickups pretty quickly here. Just want to go over some quick guys that you can grab. If you're, again, like Scott said, if you have some guys on bye, if you unfortunately, rostered some of these injured players and they don't make it back for week 6, there's a couple of guys that you can grab to, sort of fill in those blank spots in your lineup. Weekly waiver wire. First, like I said, Kenneth Walker is my number one waiver wire pickup for this week. But second for me is Raheem Mostert from the Miami Dolphins. He's about 60% rostered in most leagues, so he's not going to be available everywhere, but has fully taken over the backfield in Miami now. I mean, it used to be Chase Edmonds and then Mostert worked in. Then it sort of flip-flopped where it was mostly Mostert, but mostly Mostert. It was...
That's a lot to say.
Yeah, I thought I screwed it up, but I think I said it right. But Edmonds was getting a few. This past week, Mostert ended up with 18 carries for 113 yards and a rushing touchdown. Chase Edmonds did absolutely nothing. I think he finished the game with 1 carry and 2 targets, no catches. So Chase Edmonds seems like he's phased out of this offense. If Raheem Mostert is available on your waiver wire, he is right behind Kenneth Walker for waiver wire ad of the week for me.
Yes, this just in: Brian Robinson, toughest man alive, survived a horrible situation from training camp. gunshot wounds, and obviously a lot of people weren't sure what was going to happen. He's available. A lot of people have stayed away. He's available in about 50% of most leagues. Yesterday made his debut, his NFL debut, and it was quite great. Again, even as an Eagles fan, it was great to see him make it onto the field. The rookie out of Alabama. 9 carries for 22 yards versus the Tennessee Titans. And I think that, it's the start of something there. Again, did 17 total carries. He had 9 of them. That backfield's going to be his. I don't think there's any question about it. So Brian Robinson, to me, is going to be somebody over the next few weeks. I think who's going to start to be just more than a blip on the radar. I think he's going to be a very functional, borderline top 25 fantasy football running back on that Washington Commander offense.
Yeah, and of those 17 rushes, 5 of them were Carson Wentz. So there was only 12 designed handoffs, and he got 9, and Gibson got 3. So I think we were all kind of expecting that to change over at some point. It was going to, sort of be more of the Brian Robinson show. I think that happened immediately, and that's not a good sign for Gibson owners. If you're an Antonio Gibson owner, I would definitely try to get Brian Robinson on your roster immediately. I'm going to hit these next 2 together. Tyler Algier from Atlanta Falcons and Damian Williams. Algier's currently about 55% rostered. He was picked up a lot last week. It was a big jump in his roster percentage from last week to this week. Had a not so great game against the Tampa Bay Bucs. Wasn't terrible, 13 for 45, but handled over 50% of the running back touches in week 5. And Atlanta is currently runs the ball the 4th highest rate in the NFL. They have 162 rushes after 5 weeks. So he is a guy who, if he continues to, remain the starter, he's going to see a bulk of those carries and should be at least flex worthy depending on the matchup moving forward. Now, Damian Williams is only about 30% rostered, mostly because he's currently on the IR, but he should be back this upcoming week. He's eligible to be back this week. I shouldn't say should, but he's eligible to come off of IR this week. It seems like, from all the reports I've read, that he's doing well. He's going to come off of IR. Now, him being the established veteran there, don't necessarily know if they're going to give him the ball, a ton right away. But these are definitely 2 guys that you should add. And at least for the next couple of weeks while Cordero Patterson is on IR, could be, like I said, flex-worthy options for you with, in the right matchup.
Moving on to another running back, Mike Boone of the Denver Broncos. We saw a little sign of him last year for the Minnesota Vikings. Mike Boone's available in about 40% of most leagues right now, but probably going to be going a little bit faster as things move through the week. So you might want to look to add him. He had 7 carries for 38 yards. One of the big things it kind of stuck out to me was he had 3 targets, 3 catches for 47 yards. And when you really compared him to Melvin Gordon there, Gordon had 3 catches, 3 targets, 49 yards. So it looks like they're trying to equal him out in the playbook. Obviously, Nathaniel Hackett's had a little bit of a struggle getting an NFL offense under his belt. That team's been interesting to say the least. And we all had to sit through that Thursday night game. Some of us were smart enough to turn it off. And I know the Amazon execs are going to go back-to-back weeks with some tough watches. But at the end of the day, Mike Boone right now looks to be pretty tangible. He was RB in our league of record. He was RB 28. So definitely on the map. And now somebody does sneak him from you. Also, Latavius Murray is a possibility as well. It's going to be interesting to see how they start to rotate those running backs because basically if Melvin Gordon keeps having some issues holding on to the football, he will not be on the field. But Mike Boone looks to be a definite pickup on your waiver wire this week.
All right, we're going to move into a couple wide receivers here. We mentioned this player last week, but I wanted to mention him again because he is still only rostered in about 50% of leagues. George Pickens from the Pittsburgh Steelers. Listen, man, it's Deontay Johnson still leading the team in targets, still ended up with 13 in this game against Buffalo. But Pickens ended up second on the team with 8 targets, finished 6 for 83. It was a tough matchup for Pittsburgh, especially for Kenny Pickett's first start going against the best defense in the league. But I truly believe, and I can see it, and I could see it in this game because I watched a lot of the Buffalo-Pittsburgh game. I could see the difference in the offense with Kenny Pickett at quarterback. I can tell that this offense is going to be better with Pickett, and he already has a really good connection with George Pickens. I do think that Pickens is going to be one of those guys like Amon-Ra St. Brown was last year, where if you grab him now and you put him on your bench, even if you don't start him, hold on to him, because by the end of the season, when him and Pickett start to get into a little bit more rhythm, and I looked at the schedule for the end of the season, a lot of good matchups for the Steelers against defenses that give up a ton of points to wide receivers and quarterbacks. I really like. I actually picked up Pickett on a couple of my rosters. I'm grabbing Pickens everywhere I can as well. And these are two guys, especially if you're struggling. I'm struggling in a couple of leagues where I'm 0-5, 1-4, whatever. I'm just like, hey, I'm blowing this up, and I'm riding the Pittsburgh Steelers, and I picked up Pickett and George Pickens, and I just feel like this is the type of duo that can over the second half of the season can really turn your team around. So definitely stash George Pickens if he's available in your league, and do it right away before other people start to catch on.
Yes, speaking of catching on, another wide receiver, seemingly talented one, rookie Alec Pierce of the Indianapolis Colts. He is very low rostered in most fantasy leagues, most of the redraft concepts, obviously, only about 5% of leagues. He had a very nice game against the Denver Broncos. He had 8 catches for 81 yards. So Alec Pierce right now is quietly becoming a little bit of a thing. Over the last 2 weeks, he is the wide receiver 40, right behind wide receiver 39, who is Michael Pittman of the same team. Now, we know that offense has had some struggles, obviously, with a lot of different things and an aging quarterback. But to see this guy getting the production that he is in a PPR concept with no touchdowns to speak of or anything like that is definitely warranted. Obviously, Matt Ryan will spread the football around. He just passed for 41 times against the Denver Broncos, and they had a very good defense, and they were actually able to sneak away with a win in a very brutal game that we just talked about. But at the end of the day, I think Alec Pierce is definitely, a stash, to say the least. He would be downright startable. He was wide receiver 16 as of this week, obviously with a couple guys to go tonight. So definitely worthwhile in a PPR concept, no matter what. Alec Pierce, pick him up, get him on your roster, stash him on the bench. It might even be worth a start this week.
Yeah, Matt Ryan's always been able to support 2 fantasy relevant wide receivers, even back to his days in Atlanta. So Pierce definitely seems like the other guy on the other side of Michael Pittman. One other guy we're going to mention picking up here, just because, I mean, he just seems to score points, and technically they have him listed as a tight end in most fantasy football websites or what have you. But Taysom Hill is rostered in roughly 25% of leagues. Had an outstanding game running the ball this past week against Seattle. Went 9 rushes for 112 yards and 3 touchdowns. Also threw a touchdown pass, 1 for 1 for 22 yards and a touchdown in the passing game. And I think, Sean Payton, when he was there, Taysom Hill was kind of his pet project. And, he really tried to get him involved as much as possible, got him involved a lot in the red zone. And honestly, I think Dennis Allen realizes that this is probably why Sean Payton did that, because Taysom Hill just, when you put him back there, you change the numbers into the offense's favor. He only has to beat one guy, to break off a big run when he's the quarterback. Plus the fact that he is always a threat to pass. I mean, I know that they don't do it often, but they do it enough to keep the defense honest. So it's hard for the linebackers to see him in the backfield, take a snap, and just immediately rush, to stop the run, because he can beat you with his arm as well. So I think if you're hurting at tight end, if you're like me and you drafted Cole Kmet in a bunch of leagues, Taysom Hill is a guy who you can throw in there every week. He may not score you a ton of points every single week, but the weeks like this week where he absolutely goes nuclear, he can single-handedly win you a week at the tight end position. So I do think that he's worth being rostered, and then you just find the right spots to play him in. I don't think he's an every week start, but if you find a good matchup or a good game script where you feel like he's going to be a usable piece of the offense, he's obviously an invaluable piece of what the Saints do. So definitely grab him and throw him on your bench.
All right, folks. Looks like that's going to do it for this week's injury waiver wire news. We are always going to give you the best that we see fit to get you in there and give you the ideas of who to pick up based on injuries and just maybe who's outperforming other people. Folks, don't forget to take a look at our website, the9routeFFB.com. You can take a look at our stats, our articles, and just keep up with things and always take a look. Sometimes we have some contests going there. Also, if you're looking to reach out to us, we have a few ways. The 9routeFFB@gmail.com. Or, on that level, you can always reach out to at the 9route on Twitter. Also, I am at Scott from Delco on Twitter if you're interested in just shooting the breeze or questions, comments, concerns regarding fantasy football. We will do our utmost to give you our professional, if you want to call it that, professional opinions based on, who we like for this week and different matchups and stuff like that.
Yeah, I definitely check out the website. It's got links to everything, all of our previous episodes, and like Scott said, we're gonna put the our new start sit contest that we're kind of running just to have a little bit of fun. We're gonna be posting the results on the website as well, so you can go check them out, and you'll find out in our start sit episode later this week who took the lead in that and how we're doing in the overall start sits and in our head-to-head contest. So you can check that out on our website as well. Again, we'd like to thank Mickey's for sponsoring the show. Mickey's 327 East Main Street in Tuckerton, New Jersey. If you're around, definitely check them out and have a bite to eat and a cold glass of beer there.
Yeah, catch a football, catch a Phillies playoff game.
There you go.
There's a lot to do. A lot to do at Mickey's Protocol Pub.
Absolutely. All right, I think that's going to do it for us for this week. We will be back shortly with our start sit episode.